Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Players, our enormously self-aggrandizing series of presentations of players here on CharismaToAC, because we are really, really, really high and mighty and think everybody wants to know everything about all of us.
Yes, go
Yes,
us.
go us. We are the best. However, we are here, as you can probably tell from the sound. We are here with Heine,
Yep.
who is not only one of our players, obviously, but also one of our storytellers or game masters, as you, depending on what terminology you prefer. It's really, let's face it, much the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, but the point of these, of course, is that we're going to do one of these for each of us, as I mentioned, and then uh, yeah, we will see. People might have a chance to as I said, to get to know us a little better, um, because we do have some comments on the we do get some comments on some of the videos that are directed towards specific people, specific players, um, and therefore we thought this would be a good idea. But let me get started on this and ask you to begin with your full name, if you wish to disclose it.
My full name is Heine.
Yes. And how old are you?
I'm 25. No, 36.
You've been turning 25 for the last 11 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. It's fine. Don't worry. You're 36. All right. And what do you do?
I am a web developer by trade. My formal education is web integrator, which is basically just a fancy word for web design, with a focus on the technical aspects, not so much the user interface and what the end user sees when he visits the website, but the back end, making it all come together, writing the code and all that.
Yes.
Since I graduated, I've branched out into to online marketing, such as social media and search engine optimization and all that. So yeah,
Yes.
that's what I do.
Yes. And I assume then that that also ties in with what your education is. Obviously, that would be
Yeah.
something that requires a fairly extensive level of
Yep.
education.
Yep.
All right. So, which of the Charisma to AC campaigns do you participate in one way or another?
Well, currently I participate in two. Well, obviously, Song of Tara, in which I play Liam, the Pag Alpha, and then I run the Warhammer 40,000 Dark Heresy campaign, Hereticus. So those are the two I currently participate in.
All right. And if you are in the banner, which of course in this case, yes, you are the second person from the left
Yes.
in the banner. Can you say something about your portrayal in that banner?
Well, as a caricature, I think it's quite fitting because um, of the members of this crew, I'm probably one of the people who like rules the most, and basically my ideal role playing experience is an equal mix of rules and role playing. And I do like to, whenever I play a role playing game, I do like to play it by the book, and I think that comes through in a sort of rules lawyer or rules lawyer ish approach to my role playing. I would like to I would like to imagine though that I'm a rules lawyer of the good variety, in that I try not to. I know that AJ and Chris in previous episodes have mentioned that one of their pet peeves is a discussion of rules in a session, and I try not to do that. I try, if I have, well, I may bring attention to something if there's something I don't agree with, but I don't let it bog down the experience, I think.
I would say that my experience at least is that as rules lawyers go, then yes, you are certainly one of the good kind.
Yeah.
It very rarely ends up being an issue while we play,
Mm.
and you and incidentally Helle as well, you are both very attentive to rules lawyering, both when it is in your favor, but also when you realize that you're being given an advantage which you're not really entitled to in the game.
Right.
So yeah,
and that's basically because to me it's not about winning. It's not about getting the upper hand on the GM or the other players or anything. No. It is a collaborative experience, and the rules element is an important part of that for me, but it's not something I do for my own gain. And so of course I also mention it whenever I probably shouldn't for my own character's sake.
Well, maybe not for your own character's sake, but certainly in the interest of fairness and even-handedness.
Absolutely.
And that is something I would have to say that if I had to put if I ever had to put a moniker on you, it would be the even-handed. Because
I like that.
You very much are. So, how long have you been a role player?
A quarter century, I think. I started when I was 11, and I never looked back. I just kept playing. So quarter century.
Quarter century.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have at times, you and I sat here and waxed lyrical about how many years if we combine the two of us.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, and demanded that the young'uns
Yes.
get the hell off our lawn.
Yes. Hoodlums, rascals, whippersnappers.
Yep.
That kind of thing. Basically, Jesus. Back in my day, a D6 was easily enough. Good grief.
So, yeah.
Oh, heavens. All right. So, how did you actually get into the hobby? If you've been playing for that long, I mean, you must remember how you originally got started.
Well, I remember that I was going to a friend's house, and we were... D&D wasn't a thing for me at the time. I thought we'd go play football or whatever else it is kids did and do. But then he showed me this red box and asked if we could, if I wanted to play it along with his big brother, and I said, sure, why not? And it actually turned out to be a hell of a lot of fun. So yeah, the red box, which is one of the early editions of Dungeons and Dragons. It really is
iconic.
It has been the entryway for so many gamers.
I think the red box, which is incidentally Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, as I recall, it is the AD&D version, isn't it?
No, it's actually
it's
just
Dungeons
Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh my goodness, that's true.
It's
so
it has this it has this iconic illustration or cover art of you see this warrior standing with the back toward the reader and fighting a red dragon over its hoard of gold. So so it was very basic. You know, you had 3 alignments. You had lawful, neutral, and chaotic, and it was
back in the day when being a dwarf was a class.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, God,
hilarious.
Yes. Those were the days. But yes, I do think that the red box is quite probably responsible for bringing more people into the hobby than any other single game system ever.
Yeah. It was a major gateway for many games.
It was a gateway drug.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And so, do you have any other hobbies or interests beside role-playing?
Well, the internet is a major interest of mine. I'm fascinated by what it is and what it has to offer, and I think that shows in the education I chose, which is basically to work with the internet professionally. So the internet, video gaming, I do a lot of that as well. I'm actually, even though I'm approaching 37, I'm actually attending this weekend a LAN party, which is basically me and my brothers sitting down and gaming an entire weekend, Battlefield and Dawn of War 2 and similar games. So, and then of course, as some of the my fellow crew members know, I am an absolute passionate supporter of the football club Manchester United, and
glory, Man United.
Yep, and have been for nearly as long as I've played role-playing games. So
yes. And I have to point out here, everyone, that when he says that he is passionate, he is not kidding. He will cancel role-playing sessions if Man United happens to be playing an important game. So to him, having 5 players sitting there going, "Aw," doesn't really move him much, because Zlatan Ibrahimovic might be putting in a goal.
Exactly. I don't know if you remember, but when we actually played together face to face last, in the apartment I lived in, one of the walls was absolutely dominated by a Manchester United flag. So
yes, I remember it. That was back in the days when I still lived in the actual vicinity of where you were.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, and yeah. That's quite a few years ago now, if you think about it.
Yeah, it is.
6 years, more than 6 years ago now. Good grief.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to specifically role-playing related questions here is, what about role-playing as a hobby? What about the game do you like the best?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when the rules and the role playing come together, that's basically my perfect role playing experience. And when I say the rules, I'm not necessarily talking about rules heavy games such as the Pathfinder RPG or the various Warhammer 40,000 role playing games. Not necessarily. They are included in this, but also light games such as Call of Cthulhu. The World of Darkness games, which are comparatively, at least, rules light.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Games such as Pathfinder. So, even in light games, I still hold on to the rules.
So basically, it's the synergy of when rules and story come together to create a greater whole.
Exactly. That's actually a very fitting word to use, synergy, because it is. I think the two can absolutely work together and can feed off each other. For instance, the dice rolls can lead to fun, descriptive narratives, such as when you, for instance, describe how we absolutely murderized Michael Blackwell, for instance.
For example, yes. Yes.
And bad roles can lead to some fun role playing as well. So there is a synergy there that I really like.
That I can see where you're coming from, absolutely. That sort of situation is basically also a matter of integrating the rules fluently and smoothly into a game, but where it is not actually the rules that dominate everything.
Absolutely, and I need to say that it's, for me, the rules should never dominate the game. Like I said, the optimal experience for me is the perfect match, the perfect mix of the two.
Yeah.
And rules shouldn't. I don't play games just for the rules, and rules should never be the more important of the two.
No.
So yeah. And
well,
then
I say no, but of course that's because I agree with you on that. So yeah. Blah.
And
yes.
as a GM specifically, I think the absolute best part of it all is getting together and facilitating those 2, 3, 4 hours, however many hours it is, each week, where we sit together and play, and facilitating that fun, being the GM, and helping my friends really tell the story. I absolutely love it. It's why I GM.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
Very well. We will get slightly back to that later on, obviously, but. What would you say is your favorite RP system, having played for as many years as you have? I mean, I don't doubt that you've tried a few different systems in your time. I know I have, at least.
Yes. Well, I do hope you're sitting down because this is going to be a shocker.
Yes, I'm prepared. I'm prepared.
My absolute favorite role-playing game system at the moment is the Pathfinder RPG, and
oh my god, I'd never seen that coming.
and that's because, to my mind at least, it does provide that synergy that I mentioned earlier between the tactical play and rules, and then having the role-play mix in with that. And it's, at least for the type of role-playing game it's designed for, which is, to say, that classic story-focused heroic fantasy experience where it is about the heroes, and it's not so much a character-driven system as it is focused on a story, and the players play the heroes in that story. And so, at least for that type of game, it's certainly my go-to. But in general, yeah, that would be my favorite game at the moment, and it has been for many years.
That actually does remind me a little of a story. I think I've mentioned it to you before as well, but I'm going to bring it up here for everyone else to listen to as well. It goes back years and years and years, back to the 90s, 80s and 90s, where there was a role-playing magazine called Dragon Magazine.
Yep.
Dragon Magazine is, just like the Red Box, is an iconic thing in role-playing. It was the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons official magazine that came out once a month. It was absolutely chock full of gorgeous artwork. It had mini campaigns. It had extra classes that you could try out, and half of them weren't really properly balanced, but you could try them anyway, and it was good fun. And in the back of this, there was always a page of, shall we call it, light entertainment, including some cartoons and the likes, jokes, jests, and so on. And there was a long-running cartoon in this magazine called Yamara. I befriended the artist of that years ago, and Yamara is a meta cartoon where the characters in the cartoon are aware that they are, at least to a certain extent, are aware that they are cartoon characters and that they are taking part in a game. And there's a situation where a dwarf, a really disgusting, foul-smelling old git, is standing outside a dungeon, and he's holding an axe in his hands, and he's looking at a younger dwarf who's wearing glasses and a beanie, basically. And he's saying to the younger dwarf, he's saying, "Now, son, I am going to teach you all the basics of dungeoneering." And the younger one says, "Oh, get off it, Gramps. We've moved on. We're doing this in the modern way." And the older dwarf looks confused. The younger one turns around and says, "Blow it!" And the dungeon behind them then blows up because somebody has basically dynamited the whole thing. And the next picture shows the old dwarf flailing in a panic with his axe out to his side. "What happened to the good old days? What happened to you walk into a room and 10-foot by 10-foot room and an orc is guarding a chest?" and somebody else comes up, grabs a hold of him and shakes him and goes, "Get a hold of yourself, man." And that's really the thing, isn't it? That it can be very rules heavy and very it can almost destroy the narrative. Or it can just, as we've mentioned before, it can be a synergy. It can fluidly intermix.
Yeah, and I'm not blind to the fact that the Pathfinder RPG can be. There are groups out there that absolutely focus on the numbers and the crunching of the numbers, and try to stack as many bonuses and modifiers onto their characters as they absolutely can in order to beat the dungeon. Yes. But that's not my approach to the system.
No. No, you don't see it as a me versus the players sort of thing.
Nope.
Or
Nope.
when you're a player as me versus the game master.
Nope. I personally think that's well, we'll get into that a bit later, I think.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Because the next question then, of course, is what are your pet peeves?
Well, I actually have a few few pet peeves, but Well, one of them is the GM versus players notion. Basically, the idea that it's the GM against the players. I absolutely disagree with that. I mentioned it earlier. It's a collaborative experience. We're in this together to create a fun story with the characters as the focal point.
Yes.
And I cannot stand the idea that the GM is out to kill the players, or the players are out to, or have this mindset that they have to beat the GM's what the GM has going on. That's just a wrong approach to it in as I see it. So that's one pet peeve. Another pet peeve I have is the I've seen this a lot on online discussions where people talk about a game, a system, a setting, or a style of play as if it's objectively wrong to play it that way. It's whenever I read this, whenever I hear it, I get this very sudden and powerful urge to hit something. Seriously, I can't.
That is saying something. You are a peaceful man, I happen to know. So yes, the fact that you get violent urges, yes.
Well, it's just as in all types of entertainment, whether it's music or movies or video games or whatever have you. There is, to my mind at least, there is no such thing as objective. It's all subjective. It's all a matter of preference. And so when someone goes onto a forum and slams some system or setting or game style as if it's objectively wrong,
yes,
I can't. I have to stand up from my chair and do something else, because that it really it pisses me off. It really does.
I mean, what harm is there in it? If you want to play World of Darkness as a happy, pink, fluffy, candy floss sort of game where everything is wonderful and beautiful and nothing bad ever happens to anyone, my personal take on it is I have no idea how you read that rule book or the setting. I have no clue whatsoever what's going on in your head. I don't know what you're smoking, and I really don't want any of it. I know for a fact that I would personally not want to play in that group. But hey, if you're having fun, then fine.
Yep, absolutely. That's really it, because that's at the core of the entire experience, is have fun, and we don't all have to have that fun the same way.
In fact, I think it would be very I think that would kind of go against the absolute essence of role playing, which is all about creativity. And creativity cannot be railroaded.
Nope,
because if everybody does the same thing, it's not creative anyway.
Nope.
So, yeah.
And the last pet peeve I have that I can think of anyway is edition wars. And so for those who don't really know what edition wars is, it's basically for most for at least for some systems, such as Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu and the various World of Darkness games. Occasionally they put out a new edition of the game. They do this for several reasons. One of which is maybe the previous edition had some funky rules that they needed to streamline. Maybe the product line has gone stagnant and they need a new revenue stream, which is then handled by a new edition. Point is, each of these editions have their fan base.
Yes.
And it's basically the same as Apple versus Microsoft or Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. They clash, and it does turn into actual wars where there's a hell of a lot of mudslinging going on, and slurs being thrown across the room as people discuss and debate and tear each other's systems apart and claim that it's utter garbage, and my edition of the game is the edition of the game, and yours just sucks and all that. And
yeah,
can't we all just get along and then play the game we want to play? And just
at this point, of course, you do realize that the Martians would shoot you.
Yeah.
Can't we all just get along? And then, anyway, sorry.
And
I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean.
It's actually a good point because it is an uphill battle.
It is.
You'll always, as soon as a new edition comes out, its
Yeah.
fan base and previous editions fan bases will clash and shout at each other. And
I
it's
mean,
all pointless. But
it is pointless, and it doesn't actually lead to anything.
Nope.
I personally do not like the more recent versions of the World of Darkness games. I'm very much a Werewolf the Apocalypse and Vampire the Masquerade sort of person. I'm also a Changeling the Dreaming sort of person, Mage the Ascension sort of person, so I'm back in those editions. And then they made the post-Gehenna, post-Apocalypse, post-End-of-the-World games, and I don't personally like them. Other people
Nope.
are welcome to play them. I don't want to, but it doesn't mean that they are objectively bad games. It means that I don't personally like them. There's a pretty significant difference.
There is, and the point isn't that we can't debate the editions, and it isn't even that we can't like them. It is when it turns ugly and you start insulting people just for playing a different edition than you.
Indeed.
We can absolutely discuss and debate. We should be able to, of course.
Yes.
So yeah.
I do, again, I have to say I agree with that personally. All right, let's move on here. Which of your current characters is your favorite to play, and why is that?
Well, so I currently play 2 characters. Do I play more? No, I play 2, I think. Gatrick and Liam.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a tough one because I like both of them, and in many ways they're kind of alike. But I know both Chris and AJ have mentioned their Song of Tower characters, and I'm going to have to do the same because my favorite of the 2, and it's by the width of a hair, I think.
Yeah.
But he constantly challenges me as a role player in a world that, well, for Gatrick and for other characters I've played previously, most other at least, it's always been in a fictional setting. It's always been in the in the fantasy realm somewhere in some setting, whether it's Kryn in Dragonlance or Golarion in Pathfinder or whatever it is. But with Liam, it's in the real world, or rather a dark mirror of the real world, but still the real world. And the balance of the real world with the and then having that layer of the supernatural on top of it, and role playing a character in that setting is I think quite a challenge. And having that character then be the Pag Alpha as he's become, that's yeah.
Yeah, and he's a latecomer to the group. He wasn't one of the originals, and yet he has risen to become Alpha of the group, which is pretty significant in and of itself as well. But it's still a different dynamic because he is not an original.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
it's but I absolutely, and that of course leads on to who is your all-time favorite character, and why would that be?
Well, so I've given this some thought, and I actually I have a few if we have the time for it.
We have nothing but time.
So the first of them, and this is in no particular order.
Yeah, of course.
The first of them is Liam, because I absolutely enjoy him. And the second character is one of the old ones I played. His name is Gareth Ravenmantle, and he was a Knights of Takhisis, which in the Dragonlance setting, the Knights of Takhisis is basically basically it's the classical chivalrous knighthood turned on its head. So it's honorable evil,
yes.
and And I, at the time, I found that to be incredibly fascinating concept to play, and I was only 16 at the time, so he might have been the black armor and all the evil stuff. But still, I found the concept rather fascinating, and it was quite a challenge to play him, and he was one of my absolute favorite characters. But I've always loved the Knights of Tarkisis as a fan of the Dragonlance setting. So there's that as well.
Absolutely, and you're preaching to the choir here, by the way, because the Dragonlance setting was seminal for me as well in my, basically in getting me to involve myself really with the hobby. So yeah.
I have more. So another character I only got to play for a short while was a Malkavian in a Vampire Dark Ages game that our fellow GM Daniel ran. Jurad de Rajemont, which was, like I said, he was Malkavian. He firmly believed that Satan wrote messages to him on the skin of mortals. So when he often he would go out and find victims whose skin he would then flay and try to decipher Satan's writings. So that
is a creepy dude right there.
He was.
I'm starting to see a theme here. First the Knight of Tarkisis, and now this Flayer vampire.
Well, the last character I want to highlight is then quite the opposite. He was a good guy in almost every respect. He was a Tiefling Inquisitor of Iomedae in the Pathfinder setting, being the goddess of justice and valor, and he was played in the Wrath of the Righteous adventure path, which is basically a demon horde invades the mortal realm, and the heroes, of course, have to stop it. And the reason why he was so cool to play was that he was an Inquisitor of Iomedae, as I said, and he focused a lot on the fight against demons. And our GM, who ran it for us, really understood how demons are in the Pathfinder settings, and
that helps, obviously.
Absolutely.
Being an Inquisitor and then having a GM who actually does demons right.
Yeah, and he did, and
yeah. That
so
would be those two things would complement each other, obviously.
Yep. So I quite enjoyed it. So yeah, those are the 4 favorite characters I can think of, at least.
Yes, and I can, with as many years behind us as you and I have, it can be very, very, very hard to settle on one character and say this is the one. I totally understand. So it's fine. You've got these 4. I'll definitely I'm with you on that. Yeah. All right. Are there some types of characters that you are more likely to play that goes both for roles and or personalities?
I think the characters I'm more likely to play are martial characters, and that goes for World of Darkness and Pathfinder and everything else, really. The fighters, the warriors, the up close and personal types of characters. Even in Call of Cthulhu, I always make sure that my characters have a high firearms skill. I don't know why, it's just a type of character.
Because really, placing a slug from a British officer's sidearm between the eyes of the great old ones is always going to work.
Yeah. Well, you do have cultists that need the.
That is true. That is true. They can be the surrogate bullet catchers instead.
Yeah. Exactly, but yeah, martial characters have always been the primary focus for me, and leaders as well. Liam is a leader. Gadrick turns out to be a de facto leader, and I have had several recent characters who also turned out to be leader type characters. So yeah.
So basically, those are the archetypes, if we can talk about such a thing here.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Is there any type of role playing that you have yet to try, but which you would like to try? And I realize that again, with the amount of experience, you've probably been around the block a few times, but
yeah, and I have been around the block a few times, so there's not really something I can think of that I haven't tried that I would like to try. It's mostly about specific systems than types of systems at this point. I've played almost everything: comedy, horror, fantasy, sci-fi.
A mixture of all of the above.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
yes. So basically, you've got. Yeah, I would imagine that you basically have experience in pretty much all the genres out there.
Yep.
At least the ones that you would want to. I know that, for example, there are a couple of things that you're not really interested in playing.
Yeah.
So, do you have any good role-playing related advice for people who listen to this?
Well, have fun. And that and it does seem like duh, but the reason I mention it is that if you recognize I'm supposed to have fun here, then and it's actually a thought in your mind, then you can easily or more easily detect when something is bothering you that's preventing you from having fun, and you're able to identify that and hopefully to deal with it. So have fun and be conscious of this requirement.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think, and again, as I've told the others as well, I think this is good advice both for role playing and life in general. But it's certainly important in terms of role playing. It's important to keep focus on why am I actually doing this.
I think so.
Why am I sitting here on a Wednesday evening with a piece of paper or two with coffee rims on it and a bunch of strangely shaped dice with a bunch of other geeks and nerds? Why am I doing this? You know,
exactly.
and of course the answer to that needs to be to have fun.
Yeah. Like I said, it is a duh thing, but
yes,
it is also something to keep in mind, I think.
Totally agree.
I think another piece of advice would be to try to move beyond your comfort zone, and that's a good one. That really it's about playing other types of characters that you normally play. I mentioned that I usually play martial characters and leader type characters, but for me that would then be to move beyond that and say let's focus a bit on spellcasters, arcane spellcasters, divine spellcasters, whatever. But it's also about trying things in your role playing that you may not think you're comfortable with, or that you haven't tried before, such as role-playing emotions, or trying that leadership role that I know I have talked about a bit about it in her episode. But the idea of if you're not comfortable with the leadership kind of character, then try it. See if it's fun. It might surprise you. So try to move beyond your comfort zone.
Absolutely. I agree. It's good advice. And obviously this leads us on to the questions on this list. If you have any GM experience, and for goodness sakes, you're brimming with it. So I would rather in your case specifically, I would rather ask or turn this question around and say, how did you get started on GMing? Because there are players out there who, my experience at least is that there are a lot of players who either sit there and say, I would like to try that, but I'm not sure if I would be able to, or if I'm good enough, or if I wouldn't mess up all the time, or that sort of thing. And then there are the players out there who sit there and say, well, we have 5 people in this group, we all want to play and nobody wants to be the GM because being the GM is boring. So what can you say there?
Well, for me, it was the latter of the two. Basically, we had to decide who took on that role as the GM, and I volunteered, and I have to say it's the most rewarding choice I've made in my time as a gamer, because being a GM is tremendous fun. It's not for everyone, but you won't know unless you try it.
No.
And you may you may find out that it's actually quite fun, the GM gig.
Yes.
Yeah, try it.
I would say, and yes, it's if then you sit there and say, okay, I'll give it a shot, and then you find out after 3 or 4 evenings, you know what, this really isn't for me. Hey, no skin off your nose. At least you gave it a shot.
Yeah, you gave it a shot. You tried it. You figured out if it was something that's for you.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yep. So in closing here, is there anything else about yourself that you would like to share with the listeners?
Well, because we are self-important pricks here on CharismaToAC.
Yes, we are.
I should mention that I actually have a cover credit on a book. Back in 2007, I co-authored the book Dragons of Spring, which is basically a D&D 3.5 adaptation of the last 4 of the original Dragonlance modules, and that was it was a huge honor, of course, because the company behind it is basically Margaret Wise Productions. Margaret Wise being the one of the principal authors of the Dragonlance setting. So, and it was a tremendous fun as well, because it wasn't just about writing D&D 3.5 stat blocks for the books. We also did quite a bit of expansion and added new encounters to the book and so on. So I got to play in that sandbox for a bit. So that was a lot of fun. Other than that, just keep watching, check us out on CharismaToAC, and yeah, that's it.
Yep. All right. Well, I will first and foremost thank you for taking part. That was I won't call it. I will not say that it was exhausting, but it was exhaustive. So we got a lot of information here, which is good. And obviously there will be one of these for each of the players on the channel, and I would urge you all to go and listen to all of them if you have any interest whatsoever in hearing anything about the people behind the voices and behind the screens. Especially seeing as we do not actually do live streams, we don't record this with pictures. We just record our voices for a number of different reasons. So. Yes, on that note, I'll say thank you for taking part, and thank you for listening to those of you who do, and we will see you next time for more of this. Meet the Players.
Yep.
Bye for now.
Bye.